Hey everyone, so I'm back and I'm so excited to review Sunrise on the Reaping today with you guys by Suzanne Collins. This is a new addition to the Hunger Games trilogy and it comes a little after The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, so you get to re-enter the Hunger Games and the world that's built and get to see Haymitch's story. So like I said, I am stoked and I can't wait to review this with you guys. I'm also going to go over all of our cameos that show up and all of the familiar faces, when and where they show up, how long you get to see them, but that will be in the spoilers. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, super quick blurb before we get started on the review. This is basically Haymitch's story. So Haymitch starts off in District 12 with his mother and his little brother, and his birthday is the Reaping Day. So he never really celebrates it, he's not excited, and obviously Haymitch has to go to the Hunger Games from what we know from reading The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Mockingjay. And so he goes to the Hunger Games and he basically decides that he wants to rebel and he wants to start an uprising. And that's basically a very short blurb before we get into this review. To start off the review, guys, I just wanted to say I was so excited to start reading this book. I had it pre-ordered on Audible and I also pre-ordered it through Barnes & Noble, but my physical copy's still not here, of course. So you won't get to see it in the video. Unfortunately, I was really looking forward to showing it off, but I devoured this book. I listened to it in less than 24 hours and while I still had work the same day. So don't ask me how I did that, but I might be a little bit crazy. Basically now, I just want to reread and rewatch every single one of the movies and the books. So I hope I'm not the only one who feels that way because I seriously want to go on a Hunger Games kick. Anyway, so many cameos, so many familiar faces, and I'm going to drop a quick list and tell you guys exactly who appears and who we see, but I'm not going to give you any spoilers. I just want to tell you who shows up in the book. Then, when we get to the spoilers, I will tell you exactly what they do, where you see them, how long you see them, and all of the good stuff. The characters that we do see: Katniss's mom and dad. We do get mention of them and we see them a couple times in the book. Wyrus, Mags, Plutarch Heavensby, BT, Effie Trinket, Lucy Gray Baird, and Katniss and Peeta. Like I said, a ton of cameos and familiar faces. I was really excited about this, and it's so fun to see characters that you're familiar with pop up in the novel. Somebody I really would have liked to see, although this doesn't seem like it would be in the same timeline, is Finnick, because man, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but if you read Mockingjay, then yeah. So, I'm going to go over characters in my review, my spoiler-free review. I'll go over characters, the most memorable ones, and some of the ones that are really important. I want to go over the plot, and then I'll go over what my favorite and least favorite thing was about this novel. So with the characters, the most memorable characters to me in this book were Ampert and Maisie. So Ampert is basically BT's son. And I don't want to say anything and I don't want to spoil it because you really get a lot here in the book and a lot goes on. So I don't remember exactly when Ampert's situation, I guess I could say, is revealed. So I don't want to say anything about him. Ampert is basically BT's son and he ends up in the Hunger Games. And the reason he's unique is he is part of the driving force for making Haymitch want to rebel against the Capitol. And so I found him super memorable and super important because he does start this out for Haymitch and he starts this fire in him that makes him want to basically destroy the game. And my second one that I said was most memorable is Maisie. Maisie is the twin of Marilee Donner. They're more high society in 12 than anyone else. So Maisie comes off as stuck up. She comes off as higher than thou kind of thing, but she has so much depth. And I'm gonna be honest, Maisie is the only character in this book that I felt like had depth and purpose and layers. Everyone else kind of felt not that built, if that makes sense. So Maisie had all of these layers and this unique personality, and she had a lot to do in the book. You basically saw her throughout the whole entire novel, and she was super important, and I really, really, really enjoyed seeing her in this novel. She was definitely, hands down, my favorite character. The only other person that I really want to mention, besides when I get into Haymitch, is Lenore Dove. Lenore Dove is basically Covey, and she's not a developed character at all, if I'm being honest. I don't feel like she's developed at all, but you only see her a few times besides when Haymitch mentions her throughout the novel. So Lenore Dove is Haymitch's girlfriend. She's Covey, so you get that kind of reminder of Lucy Gray Baird and her lineage. Lenore Dove felt more like a watered down version of Lucy Gray than anything else, and I didn't feel like she had enough depth for me to even care about her. The same goes with Haymitch's mom and his brother. As far as Haymitch goes, I really did like seeing his character and how he evolved into the person we see in the Hunger Games, but he honestly wasn't that interesting in this book for me. Like, I loved following him because I knew who he becomes and I know what role he has to play in the Hunger Games trilogy, but in this novel, like, I wasn't invested in him. And besides, like, the basic stuff for him, he flip-flopped a lot between wanting to rebel and wanting to stand up against the Capitol, but also wanting to protect his family and his girlfriend. And he had BT, who was the perfect example of what happens when you mess with the Capitol. But still, Haymitch kept going, okay, well, maybe they'll just punish me. Maybe they'll just punish me, so I'm going to rebel against the Capitol. But oh, wait, I have to protect my family. It gave me a little bit of whiplash, and honestly, it made me feel like Haymitch was dumb a lot of the book. So that's how I felt about him, but I did still enjoy following him through his story and knowing where he ends up. So when it comes to the plot for the book, don't expect much. That sounds bad, but it's really not a bad thing, but kind of still is. Anyway, the plot follows the exact template of the Hunger Games. You have the morning of the reaping, and the children get reaped, and then they're heading to the Capitol on the train, and then they get to the Capitol and they're paraded around and they're cleaned and they're fed, and then they're trained, and then they're interviewed, and they get their interview score. So you have that same layout, and then you have the Hunger Games, and then you have the consequences of the Hunger Games at the end. Exact same layout, the exact same as the Hunger Games. So nothing felt new or original except maybe the way that the Hunger Games was set up, the mutts that they had, the way that the actual arena was set up. That was all new, but it wasn't anything that was thrilling enough to be like, wow, this feels new and refreshing. It was more of just like, we're revisiting this world and this is how it was. So it didn't feel like that much effort was put into making the plot different from any of the other novels, even though it was very predictable. And I'm talking, I predicted everything to a T. Even though it was very predictable and nothing surprised me at all, I still really enjoyed reading this just because I'm so in love with the Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Mockingjay, all of that. So if you enjoyed the Hunger Games trilogy and you enjoyed The Ballad of Songbird and Snakes, you will enjoy this book. Just don't be surprised when it doesn't deviate from what has been previously done. All right, so my very favorite thing about this book, seeing the cameos, familiar faces, and how they all tie into the story and eventually come in The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. And then obviously getting to revisit the world that we all love, adore, and can't wait to get back to every single time. What did I dislike? Obviously, the predictability. And I'm not going to say that I hate it because I didn't hate it at all, but it was so predictable. And I wish that there was a little more in terms of differences between the way that this book is set up and the way that the first book was set up. It felt more like a mashup of The Hunger Games and The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, at least when it comes to the Covey romance, and you're just getting all of the same information piled into the book with Haymitch's name. All right, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. I'm going to say so much that happened in the book, and it's probably going to give everything away, even though I already said it was predictable. So if you haven't read the book, you don't want to know what happens in the book, please don't watch any further because we're going to be going over everything. So this is where I want to break down where each character comes in, what role that they play in the book, and how long they're actually in the book. Katniss's mom and dad are mentioned and seen in the beginning and in the end. They're actually Haymitch's friends, but other than that, you don't get much more mention. Wiress was one of District 12's mentors for Haymitch and Maisie and the two other District 12 children. You see Wiress basically throughout the beginning of the novel before they get into the Hunger Games. After Haymitch comes out of the Hunger Games, you see Wiress again, but this is after she's been tortured for helping Haymitch try to rebel. So the Wiress that we see at the end of Sunrise on the Reaping is the Wiress that we see in Catching Fire, who can barely form sentences and string words together. Mags, same exact situation as Wiress. She was a mentor for the District 12 children, and she eventually gets tortured for her role in helping Haymitch rebel. Plutarch Heavensby, he was actually a pleasant surprise. It was so exciting to actually see him in this book, because he's basically a filmmaker for District 12, and he's getting all of the action shots. He puts them all in the videos to show the capital and the nation, and he comes up and he seems like this guy who is completely all for the capital. But then he kind of slides some hints here and there to Haymitch that he wants to help, and he wants Haymitch to keep going, and he wants Haymitch to be strong. And then eventually he gives Haymitch crucial information that's needed to rebel against the capital in the 50th Hunger Games. So you see him throughout the entire book, but he never gets caught, so he doesn't get tortured like Mags and Wiress. Plutarch, he kind of hides behind the scenes after Haymitch gets out of the Hunger Games until you get Katniss, and he comes back and he's like, okay, it's time to start a revolution. So BT comes back. He's Ampert's father, and the reason that BT is here, it's actually super depressing. BT tried to refuse the capital, and I forget exactly why they said he refused the capital or what it was for, but anyway, his punishment is basically having to sit in the training and be up close and personal, while Ampert was picked on purpose to go into the 50th Hunger Games. And so BT has to watch as his son is surely going to die because he's young and he's going to get killed in the Hunger Games, and there's only one winner, and there were 48 kids. So that's torture, obviously. And you see BT a little bit in the beginning, and he's mentioned throughout the book, but after they go into the Hunger Games, I don't think you see him again. But he also tries to help Haymitch rebel once he meets Haymitch in the training area. Effie Trinket, our favorite unique woman, shows up a little later in the novel, and she actually ends up saving District 12 from a fashion catastrophe. She steps in when District 12 stylist actually doesn't show up, and she makes sure that they're dressed to impress. And then she actually tries to dress them nicely, and then that kind of starts the beginning of the long relationship that we see between Haymitch and Effie in the Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. So Lucy Gray Baird is only mentioned once. This one I was kind of confused about, and honestly made me wonder more about what happened in the Ballad of Songbird and Snakes. But Lucy Gray Baird is mentioned at the very end when Haymitch sees her headstone. So he sees Lucy Gray Baird's headstone, so she's obviously dead. I don't know how long she's been dead, but she wouldn't have been that old, so something must have happened to actually make her die, because President Snow is still alive and he's only really in his 50s. So makes me wonder if she actually died at the end of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and that's why she's buried where she is. But basically, that's the only time her name is really mentioned, but she's mentioned a couple of times throughout the novel as the unknown winner from 12, and the only winner that District 12 has ever had. So, last but certainly not least, Katniss and Peeta. They make a short little appearance in the epilogue, and obviously this is after the events of the Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. Now, Katniss is mentioned as an adult and as a baby because her parents are mentioned in the epilogue as showing the tiny baby and being so excited, and her father was specifically mentioned, and that was before her father died. And then they're mentioned again, Katniss and Peeta, at the end when they help Haymitch as he's still dealing with his alcoholism at the end of Mockingjay after the revolutions happened, all of that good stuff. As far as other spoilers go, there's honestly not much to spoil because it was so predictable. So Haymitch tried to start a revolution. He failed. He got his mother, brother, and his girlfriend killed, then turns to alcohol to forget his problems. We already knew that last part because he's an alcoholic in the Hunger Games, but what makes everything else so predictable is he had to have lost someone very important or lost a lot in order to be in the state that he was in the Hunger Games without any support whatsoever. So we knew that all of his loved ones had to die. I just wish that there was a way that we could have made this a little less predictable and a little more unique, but I have no suggestions for how to do that, so I can't comment. Okay, so that was my whole entire spoiler-free and spoiler-full review of Sunrise on the Reaping. I really did enjoy this book, guys, despite the criticisms that I have for it. I would give it a solid 4 out of 5 stars because, like I said, I listened to it in less than 24 hours and I really was engaged the whole entire time I was listening. But it wasn't unique, it was very predictable, and the only thing that really kept me interested was following the characters that we already know and love and the cameos that you got of all of the other characters who appeared throughout the novel, because you kept going through the pages and you're like, okay, who's gonna show up next? Anyway, that's my review. I want to know, please tell me what you thought of the novel down in the comments below, and if you like this video, please subscribe because I make book reviews all the time on YouTube, and yeah, I will see you guys later. Bye!